Welcome to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. My name is Chris White, your host, and this is the LinkedIn Live program for pre-sales professionals and pre-sales leaders. And folks, these are live conversations, as I like to say. These are by design unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And I have a very special guest today, and we're going to be talking about some pretty important topics for many of you out there. As you can see in the screen, his name is Yuji Higashi. He is the co-founder or one of the co-founders of Better Career. Some of you may also know him as the former co-founder of the Presales Collective. He is by no means any stranger to this community, and he's just an all-around good guy. Yuji, thank you so much for being here, sir. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Chris. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on with you. And we've known each other for a long time, and we've certainly both been involved in the pre-sales community for some time. So I'm glad to finally be on the show.
Well, dude, it's a pleasure to have you. And I just have to say, there's something about your voice that's very calming. I'm not sure what have you ever been told that before, that you have a very calming voice?
I don't think I've been told that before. Something I get told a lot is that I'm a very intimidating interviewer, though, apparently. So,
really? That surprises me.
But yeah, that's a calming voice. I'll take that.
I just, for some reason, I find your voice very, very calming. So Yuji, many people probably know you and know your background a little bit. I introduced you as the co-founder of Better Career. Do you mind just taking a minute and sharing a little bit more about yourself and your background and maybe a little bit of your pre-sales journey and how you ultimately found your way to now running a business that helps people making job change, career change, etc.
Yeah, no, happy to. I had an interesting career, so I'll try to summarize it quickly and concisely here. But I've been in the tech world, primarily startups, for most of my career, and started on the professional service side way back at a company called Aptio, based out here in Bellevue or Seattle, Washington. Did professional services for a while, eventually flipped over to the pre-sales side, the sales engineering side, and then had the opportunity to also join a different startup and actually build a team from scratch. So I joined a company called Outreach, also out here in Seattle. And I was tasked with building a team from essentially scratch to, eventually a global solutions consulting team. And through that experience, I did that for about 5 years. And through that experience, I learned a lot, but also had a lot of figuring out to do as far as how do you build a pre-sales team? What does a pre-sales organization look like? And what are all the things that you need as part of that? And so that really kind of was the genesis and what made me create an initial community around pre-sales within the Seattle area. And then eventually I linked up with James Kakis, who was doing something similar in Chicago. And together we ended up creating Presales Collective, which we felt like there was a big gap around. There wasn't a global pre-sales community. There were pockets here and there, maybe around the world, but nothing that kind of connected all of us in pre-sales together. And so that's what we ended up doing, was creating a Presales Collective. And funny enough, now that I recall, right, the first webinar that we ever had, I think, was with you.
Yeah.
Actually, you were there from the very, very, very beginning.
April, I think it was April of 2020.
2020, yeah, exactly. So, so it's come a long way from there, and I think it just, the growth of it just spoke to like the gap that existed. There was a big vacuum there, and as soon as we put a place for people to go, a lot of people came into it, and I think now there's probably 40,000 people that are part of that community. Yeah. And so, spent some time there building that. And that was a lot of fun. Also, a big part of what I did while I was there was build out Presales Academy, which was a reskilling boot camp to help people get into pre-sales, because pre-sales, as we know, is like one of the best careers you could have for people that are in it. A lot of us feel that way. And so we wanted to help more people get into it. And so we started Presales Academy. I ran that for a while. And then, they got to a point where it was just time for me to move on and do something different. And that's where, took a little time off, but realized the part that I really enjoyed about that journey was helping people in their careers, either make career pivots, advance in their careers. And because I have a lot of experience in pre-sales and go-to-market and sales through when I was at Outreach, we sold to sales. So very familiar with the role. And so that's where we started Better Career, to basically focus on helping people improve their careers, to make their careers better. And so that's what we do now is we basically do a lot of coaching, and we run programs to help folks either get into pre-sales, sales, or customer success, and also a little bit of project management. We help people get into those roles, or we also help a lot of folks that are in those roles who want to land their next job and want some help with that. Or
Mm.
maybe they're in a role and they want to get promoted or take that next step into management. And so a lot of our clients we work with are, looking to basically take their career to the next level. And that's what we spend, our days on now. And it's been a lot of fun. Maddie Stremick, she helped me essentially build out Presales Academy way back when. She ended up joining me, several months after I started Better Career. And so she's joined me now as a co-founder. And we've been doing it for probably about 9 months now or something like that. And it's been a lot of fun. We've met a lot of amazing people who we've helped, with their career journey. And it's something that we really enjoy. So yeah, that's
It's
I guess it was a little longer than I wanted it to be, but that's the short of it, I guess.
I mean, it's an incredible journey, and
Yeah.
there's nothing more satisfying than helping others grow and succeed. And it's interesting, Yuji. You probably don't know this part of my story, but I was 50, not unlike you. I started my career well as a software engineer, and then a consultant, an IT consultant. And I was 15 years into my consulting career and discovered that I was just miserable in my job, and thought there was something wrong with me. I actually found a professional career development coach, in essence. This is back
Mhm.
in like 2005, so almost 20 years ago. And it was he who helped me discover that I had a number of talents that just needed an outlet. And it was that program that helped me. It gave me the encouragement and the confidence to get into pre-sales. Now, he wasn't necessarily helping people get into pre-sales. He was
Yeah.
just helping people sort of figure out what they should be doing with their careers. But I am the biggest proponent of career coaches and the type of work that you guys are doing. So it is such a valuable service. By the way, Yuji, Ron Whitson says hello. I definitely count Yuji as a friendly human. I couldn't agree more. Ron, by the way, folks, we don't see
Thanks,
you
Ron.
out there. So if you care to say hello, or if you care to ask Yuji or myself any questions, please feel free to do so. So Yuji, let's pick this apart a little bit. First of all, I want to invite you to talk a little bit just about the market, because, a couple of years ago, it seemed like hiring managers couldn't find anybody, and people were demanding and getting astronomical compensation packages. And here we are just a couple of years later, and the market has completely reversed. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the market right now.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. I mean, I know back when I was at Outreach, which was a few years ago now, and the market was very different. I remember I would struggle to find candidates. I always had probably 6 headcount open on my team, could never find enough people fast enough. Everybody that I was wanted to give an offer to had 2 or 3 offers. And obviously now we know the market is 180 from that. It's very different. It's much more competitive. Fortunately, a lot of the worst, I think, as far as layoffs, right, and
Yeah,
hiring freezes is seems to be behind us, which is really
yeah.
good, and things are steadily improving. It's not a V-shaped recovery by any means, right? It's very steady and slow as far as things getting better, but there's a lot of data to suggest and signs of improvement, which is really good. So we can get back to a more of a normal market, a more of a
Yeah.
normal balanced job market. And so that's what we're seeing right now is that there are a lot more companies that are starting to open up headcount and hire more, not like in massive chunks like in the past, but they're being much more thoughtful, right, and selective.
Mm,
But there's a lot of, nobody wants to overhire, right? Because, we've all gone through that where companies had
yeah.
overhired and had to then lay off people. And so companies rightfully so are, and doing the right thing and trying to be much more thoughtful about hiring. But
Mm,
that just means, there's also a lot of, the processes tend to be a little longer and a little more,
mm,
thoughtful as far as the steps involved and things like that. And we're still in a situation where there's a lot of talent out there that are looking for jobs. There are still layoffs happening, and there are some layoffs that happened earlier this year where there are still a lot of really qualified, great candidates in the market looking for their next role. And so it still is a more competitive market than what we've been used to in the past. And so, throughout it just means that like people need to approach their job search a bit differently, right? If you're looking for a new job. And there's also a lot of people, frankly, one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is that there's a lot of people that are in roles at companies still that are looking for a new role for a variety of reasons. Oftentimes there's a couple, I guess, main reasons that we run into a lot is that people haven't been getting great raises, right? They haven't been getting great comp adjustments because, budgets are tight. And so the best way for them to then get a raise potentially is unfortunately to leave and go to another role. And good experienced folks are able to do that. And the other reason is that, when companies go through layoffs, the culture changes, right? The morale struggles sometimes. And so a lot of folks are just looking for a fresh start, right? In a new company that potentially just doesn't have the baggage that they went through as far as the changes in the organization that come with, dealing with the challenges like layoffs and things like that. So market is improving generally, but it's still very competitive. And we foresee it to be like that for some time as far as like still fairly competitive, but more and more opportunities are opening up, which is good and healthy.
Yeah. By the way, a few people are chiming in to say hello. Clifford in Richmond, Virginia. We have Mary in Spain. Thanks for joining, Mary. Heather asked a question, and Heather, I'm going to get to your question in just a moment. Clifford asked a question that was actually on my mind, and then Heather, we're going to come back to your question because that's an important one. But a sort of an easier, I think, and more timely question. Why do we're talking about the market, the fact that it's more competitive? Is it because there are more folks entering the profession, or is it just because there were so many layoffs and there was just a decrease in demand? What is your perspective on that, Yuji?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's honestly it's a bit of all of that, right? So, just the supply and demand curve completely flipped, right? As the market changed. In other words, there's a lot less roles than there used to be, and there's a lot more available talent that is skilled and experienced for those roles. And so there's just less roles for more people to go after. And there's a lot of people that got laid off at the beginning of this year when there was, if you remember, there was a big swath of layoffs for a lot of tech companies again this year. And a lot of people after layoffs take a break, right? They get some of these companies like Salesforce offered very good severance packages. And so they take 3-4 months, 6 months just to kind of, reset in their life and, rightfully so. But now they're entering the job market too, right? They're getting back in. And so that's what we're seeing a lot of too. So there's a lot of people looking. That's what makes it certainly more competitive. And then we're still, back when tech had its heyday, right? And everybody was trying to get into tech because the salaries were going bonkers and things like that. A lot of people were trying to enter from other industries, especially industries that were starting to, struggle a little bit, like mortgage, real estate, things like that. People were trying to get into tech, and there's still a lot of people trying to get into tech. So then you have a lot of new entrants and new, fresh talent coming in too. So I think that those folks are competing for roles as well. Those are different types of roles usually, right? More entry-level roles than the more experienced roles, but generally across all roles within sales, go-to-market, pre-sales, right? There's just generally more competition.
Yeah. The irony, Yuji, is that I think the Presales Collective actually had something to do with bringing more people into this profession.
Yeah,
Right?
a lot of what we try to do. Yeah, a lot of what we try to do is spread awareness of the role, and we always talk about how great it is. And then we did create Presales Academy as well, and so that was a big part of that program was to help people reskill into pre-sales roles, and so that's a part of it. Fortunately, like in pre-sales, there aren't a ton of programs that do that. I think we're like software engineering. There are a ton of boot camps, and so if you're in software engineering, entry-level roles are insanely competitive. And not only that, but a lot of these software engineering roles are getting outsourced or offshored, because companies are trying to lower their cost base and get much more efficient. And so that's a whole different world. We won't get into software engineering because that's not the role of topic here. But yeah, some of that does exist in pre-sales and sales as well, but not so to the degree of some other roles in tech.
Yeah. I want to go to Heather's question because this is something that we're going to pick apart and talk about a great deal. Heather, thank you for your question. What can help someone stand out in this market? Let's take that one first.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are a lot of things you can do. And I will say it's not necessarily one thing, right? Just like a lot of things, it's not a silver bullet that's going to help you rise above the rest. And this is something we talk about all the time with our clients. It's doing all of the little things
Mm,
throughout your process in your job search, but also how you present yourself professionally, like your LinkedIn profile and things like that. It's doing all these little things that really stack up to make you the far better candidate than the rest of the field.
mm,
Um, so maybe to give you some specific examples of that, like back in 2020, before prior to that, right? You could have a good resume and throw it out to a bunch of jobs and probably get a handful of interviews and then ultimately get 2 job offers. Right now, you need much more than that. You need a stellar resume that really highlights the most compelling parts of your experience and your skills that's most compelling to a hiring manager, and specifically the hiring manager for the role that you're going after, right? You can't try to have your resume speak to too many different roles because then it's confusing for the recruiter to look at it. And if a
mm.
recruiter is confused, they're going to pass, right? Because they have 100 other really good resumes to look
I
at.
mean, let me just stop you right there. What you just said is so profound. If the recruiter is confused, they're going to pass. Like
Yeah.
they're not going to even take the effort or make the effort to try to understand because they've got 100 to go through. So
Yeah.
they're looking for the few resumes that just jump off the page as a good fit, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and because they know they have so many other good ones probably in the pile that if they can't figure out what value you bring to that role right away, they're going to move on to the next one. So obviously resume is key, but that might be an obvious one, right? But nowadays, I argue that a LinkedIn profile is actually more important than your resume because a resume
Mm,
gets viewed by the recruiter and maybe throughout the interview process a little bit, but your LinkedIn profile gets viewed by all of those people throughout the interview process as well, because oftentimes they default to just clicking your LinkedIn profile,
of
but
course.
also with networking, right? We know the power and the importance of networking if within an organization to get a role or just, within a community like the pre-sales world. And so your LinkedIn profile really helps you stand out when it comes to not only interviewing and promoting yourself for a position, but also with networking. And so having a
Mm,
really compelling a LinkedIn profile that also tells the story of who you are and the value that you bring to an organization in the context of the role that you're applying for, that is hugely important as well. And then, there's other things that it really help you stand out too. Beyond that is, what we call proof assets, or sometimes we call them advantage assets, because they give you that advantage, that leg up
mm,
in your job search, and things like that could be, an example of that would be like, let's say you're going after your first SC role, and maybe you were a real estate agent before or something like that. The biggest objection, or one of the objections that a hiring manager for a sales engineering role would have is, can this person do a product demo? Are they technical, right? Or can they, do a thoughtful, structured, value-based software demo? And so they're not going to you're not going to overcome that objection through a resume with a bunch of words on a page. You got to show
right,
them, right? And the best way to show
right.
them is record yourself doing a 5-10 minute demo that shows you have a good structure, that shows you understand not just features and functions, but also the business value that those
Yeah.
features and functions provide. Do that demo and then send it out to the hiring manager attached to your
Mm,
application. Right now, you're showing your skills and your competency versus
yeah.
just talking about it on a resume, words on a page. And that's much more compelling. That's how you stand out, because that hiring manager is not getting any videos, right? He might be getting a couple, maybe once in a
Right.
while, but still in
Yeah.
this market, you'd be surprised that hiring manager, a lot of people just rely on their resume because that's what you were taught to do,
Right.
in school or throughout our careers. And so you got to find creative ways to stand out. So that's just one example. There's a lot more, that we kind of cover in our programs, things like that. But it's being about creative, finding ways to stand out, and also just showing that manager that you are creative and you do take extra steps. You go the extra mile, because that's what they want for
Mm.
their SCs to do for their prospects and their customers, is to take those extra steps, go the extra mile for them. And so that's what you're showing by taking those extra steps.
One of the things I told a gentleman whom you might even know once, he came to me and he said he was looking to break into pre-sales, and I know he's connected with a lot of people in the community. And he reached out to me for one, he was preparing for one interview in particular. And I said to him, keep in mind, the interviewing manager, the interviewing team, they're going to watch how you sell yourself, because that's how you are going to sell their
Yeah.
product and their company if they were to hire you, right? So
Yep.
you're in essence demonstrating how you sell as you go through the interviewing process and the marketing process. And this is really what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Is it's a you're doing self marketing in essence,
Totally.
right?
Yeah, that's a great call. I mean, that's something that we coach our folks on, the clients we work with all the time, is exactly that. Like, and I remember when I was hiring for sales engineers on my teams, I would try to picture when I'm talking to that person, like, can I put this person in front of a prospect for a big opportunity, big
Yeah.
deal, right? Can I put them in front of executives at a customer? And so that's exactly right, right? And there's some things you can coach, obviously, that don't need to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect when you're interviewing, but you want to show enough to remove as much doubt or hesitation as possible from that hiring manager's and that hiring team's mind. And so even small things, right? Like making sure because a lot of our meetings these days are virtual, right? Making sure that your virtual presence is good, like lighting, audio, like even small things like that. Anytime there's little doubt, little things that they're like, oh, that's not great. These things kind of stack up, and eventually you disqualify yourself, right? And so there's it's all the small things that you need to think about, and sometimes you need somebody to help with that, and that's obviously what we do as a service now. But even just a friend, a colleague, a peer, a mentor, you just need somebody to kind of help you through that sometimes, to make sure you're catching your blind spots, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yuji, let me push our pause button just for a moment. So
Sure.
there are so many comments and questions. Hazel and John and Taylor, Chris Mabry has chimed in. Chris, we'll get to your
Great.
question in just a second. I want to double click on the second part of Heather's question, and that is, do you notice a rise in the need of more and more technical skills in pre-sales? I'm asked this a lot as well. Now, I have a perspective, but before I share a thought, I'm curious to hear, because you're closer to the actual interviewing side of this market than I am, and the hiring side of this market than I am. Are you seeing a need or an increase in demand for more technical skills?
Yes and no. Yeah, I guess I'll throw the it depends out there. So yes, I mean, there's a lot of SE roles that do require some technical depth in certain areas, and we are definitely seeing a lot of that, and probably more of that. And so having brushing up on technical skills, developing technical skills is important. But I will say there's also a lot of roles out there that don't necessarily need that, and there's still a lot of roles where a lot of those technical skills are nice to haves, right? And not hard requirements. And a lot of what hiring managers continue to look for is, do you have some technical capacity or aptitude, some ability to learn technology quickly?
Absolutely.
They want to see that. And then, do you have the drive and the curiosity to go and learn the technologies that you need to
Bingo.
do to close the gap, to be effective in the role? And so it's a little bit of both, right? Like, it's the spectrum. I'd say, there are, if you have some deep technicals in certain area, deep technical skills in certain areas, that's great, especially if those are in demand, because there'll be a lot of opportunity. For instance, we work with somebody who has a deep data background, data warehouses, data lakes, things like that. Lots of opportunities coming his way, right? Ton of them. And then, there are some other technical areas that don't have that. And so obviously, if you have some really in demand narrow tech skills, and that's great. But, being too narrow can also hurt you sometimes, right? Because you get kind of pigeonholed sometimes, potentially. So that's why it's a little bit of double edged. But I will say that if you don't have technical skills, definitely try to supplement, but don't feel like you have to go and do a coding boot camp. Some people like swing too far in one direction, saying, "Oh, I got to go learn how to code if I want to be an SC." No, you don't. You just need to understand a little bit more, maybe, and go a little bit further on the spectrum, and then just show a hiring team that you're willing to learn very
Right.
deeply whatever you need to learn to be effective in the role. And that is typically going to be enough to get you hired.
Yeah. I'm particularly glad that you said that last part there, because this is the advice that I give, because I have people come to me all the time say, I think I want to get into pre-sales, and they've heard of it either from a colleague or from a friend, or maybe there are sales engineers in their company. They're like, I'm not particularly technical. Should I go enroll in some program? And my answer is always no. You don't. First of all, are you an expert in something? Are you an expert in
Yeah.
some field? Right. That's expertise doesn't necessarily have to be technical. Right now,
Right.
to your point, like if you want to go work for a data science company and be one of their sales engineers, well, yeah, you might
Yeah.
need some data science, and you might, so you've got to channel or target the right kind of company, right? So
Yeah.
so glad you said that. But before, because I want to go to Chris Mabry's question, it's a good one. There was one thing that I was gonna say when we were talking about this idea of self-marketing and answering Heather's question. How do you stand out? My perception is a lot of us in this role, or a lot of us that are attracted to a role like pre-sales, like sales engineering, we're sometimes a little uncomfortable about putting ourselves out there.
Yeah.
Do you find that to be true in or with the candidates that you're working with?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I used to be the same way, right? I used to be very much, wasn't a big self advocate, wasn't necessarily somebody that liked to promote myself a lot. And what I've learned certainly over the years, a lot of your career and how you're able to progress is through self advocacy, through self marketing, and a little bit of self promotion, right? And you got to do those things in the right way, obviously. But yeah, I mean, frankly, that's a lot of what getting hired is, especially in a competitive market. And what I say all the time is it's never the most experienced or the most qualified person that actually gets the job that gets hired. It's the person that is able to self-market themselves the best. In other
Yeah.
words, highlight their skills, their existing skills and experience, and also what value they will bring to the organization, making a case for that, not just what they have today, but how they'll able to go and make a big contribution, impact on the business. If you can convey that and market that to an employer, that's what's going to get you hired over somebody that's more experienced. And that's something that we've done really well with a lot of career changers. I mean, we with Pre-Sales Academy and even what we do now, we've helped people that have very like no tech experience, even no sales engineering experience, but they're getting hired in the sales engineering roles because over more experienced people oftentimes, right? Because they're marketing themselves in a way that is very compelling to those hiring teams. And so, yeah, and when it comes down to it, right, like it's all about how do you present yourself, and what you have and what you can bring to the table.
Yeah. Well, like what I've said for years, the best product doesn't usually or doesn't necessarily win, right? But
Yeah,
oftentimes the best
yeah,
demo does.
yeah,
Right? I mean, this is the business that we are in, is
exactly.
is competing against other product teams, other sales teams, right? Well, now we're just competing against other individuals. And to your point, if you're not noticed, you're not even going to get the opportunity to sit for an interview. And the
Yep.
only way to get noticed is to mark yourself. Love the conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to and there's a few other comments and questions that I need to catch up on. Let's go to Chris's question. It's a good one. It's an interesting one actually. So, and by the way, Chris Mabry, I hope you're still out there. It's good to see you. His question: back in the day, 2 years ago, a whole 2 years ago, virtual coffee chat was a way to build a bridge into a company that you were interested in. How do we do it better today? Thanks for the question, Chris. What is your thought? What is your response to that, Yuji?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, a virtual coffee chat is a very effective way to network quickly and also be very targeted in how you network because networking can happen in a lot of different ways, right? In person, going to networking events, things like that. But that stuff obviously it takes a lot of energy and time and things like that. And you don't also always know who you're going to meet with necessarily when you go to events like that. So virtual coffee chats are still actually what I think are very effective. But there are a lot of other ways to connect with people, especially like-minded people or people that are in the role that you're interested in or want to get into, or in the company that you want to ultimately break into or get a role in. And Presales Collective is a great example of that. For there's their community where they have a Slack environment, right? You can go in there and connect with other people, learn from
Yeah.
folks, and generally people that are involved in a community are going to be more open to networking anyways, right? Because that's why they joined a lot of times, is to
Right.
connect with other people who are in the similar profession. And so there's a lot of communities now, obviously for Presales Collective is a great one. And for sales reps, there's, a bunch of them. For CSMs as well, there's a lot of different communities. A lot of them are often free too. So those are a great way to connect with folks that are in those roles that you want to go after potentially. And then if you're going after a specific company, right, oftentimes you can, I think it's virtual coffee chats are probably still the most effective if you're trying to go after a specific company, because you can search for those people that are working at those company on LinkedIn very easily, find people that are in your target role and start connecting with them, reaching out to them, reaching out to them cold. Maybe you have a connection, mutual connection, you can get a warm introduction from.
Yeah.
But it's still, I think, like the sniper approach to networking is that, through a virtual coffee. So I think it's still very effective, but fortunately there's a lot of other ways to do it now too, with online communities like Presales Collective. And then also, networking events are great. When you go to like more generic networking events, right? Like your return on those can be, a little more, who
Yeah.
knows, but what's nice about something like Presales Collective is if you go to their events as an example, or like, Pavilion or some of the other sales focused events, it's very focused as far as the people that are there. They're all in the role or very close to the role.
Yeah.
And so going to those type of events would be more effective, I think, than maybe a more general like tech event or something like that.
Yeah. How
Yeah.
important, and I want to get Taylor asked a question, which I want to get to in a minute,
Yeah.
but we're talking about LinkedIn profile and networking, our connections. How important is it for people to have a pretty healthy number of connections in LinkedIn? And is there a certain bar that people should have, or is it even important?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think it's that important. I'll say the two reasons why it might be kind of important would be having over 500 connections. I think LinkedIn unlocks some things for you. If I don't know exactly, I can't remember exactly what it does, but I think if you have more than 500, it kind of unlocks some capability.
Yeah.
The other reason might be just that if you have more connections, right, you might be perceived as more connected, so people might be more interested in connecting with you.
Yeah.
But I think that again, that impact is probably very low at too. But I think generally, like the more important thing is the quality of the connections that you have.
Mm,
And a lot of people think that networking is a kind of a numbers volume game, and to some extent maybe it is. But I've met with people that have had hundreds of networking conversations, virtual coffee chats, and haven't really progressed in their career, or maybe gotten that job that they're trying to get through those conversations, because they're not
mm,
having quality conversations. They're not building connection. They're not building a relationship. They're not necessarily adding value maybe to those conversations. And so that's like with networking, that's the most important thing.
yeah.
But to the person's point, right? I think in order to get those conversations, you need to have a good LinkedIn profile that accurately represents you as a professional, and what value you could potentially bring to a role or a job, but also what value you can bring to that person that you're looking to network with. Because especially if you're
Mm,
reaching out to somebody cold to have a networking conversation, the first thing they're going to do is click on your LinkedIn profile, and the questions they're
of
going to
course.
ask themselves are, can I learn something from this person? Is this
Hmm.
person somebody I can get some value from? Or maybe is this person somebody that I really think I can help, right? Because people like helping ultimately.
Yeah.
But if the answer is no to all those questions, they're probably not going to respond to your message, not because they're mean, they don't want to, because they're busy, right? And they're probably
Yeah.
getting a lot of messages. And so you have to also, when you're trying to network, find ways to bring value to that other person. And a lot of people ask, well, like, how do I bring value, especially if I'm asking them for something and need their help? How can I bring value to that conversation? And sometimes it's honestly just bringing energy to that conversation, maybe bringing humor, lightening that person's day. It can be small things. Maybe you can share something you've learned about their industry. that could be interesting to them, right? Or maybe you can offer an introduction to somebody in your network. So there's always to add value to other people, but a lot of, what you want to do is just build that rapport, build connection, find ways to add value. And if you do that enough times, it's going to come back to you, with pretty big return. And so that's something we coach people on a lot is how do you really, expand your network quickly, but in the right way.
Yeah. Taylor, I'm going to invite you to hold on to your question just for another minute because I want to continue down this path with Yuji for just a moment. And by the way, folks, if you're just joining, I'm speaking with Yuji Higashi. He is the former co-founder of Presales Collective. He's now one of the two co-founders of a company called Better Career, and he literally is in the business of helping people build a better career and land their next job, whatever that might be, and whatever role they happen to be in. We're talking about reaching out to maybe individuals who currently work for a company that may be one of your target companies for a potential new job. My question, Yuji, is going to be or is something along the lines of, how do you recommend people reach out and what should they actually say? Like, I have a perspective on this that I think if I want to get a job at, you mentioned ServiceNow just by chance. If I'm trying to break into ServiceNow and I just want to connect with some people who I think might be at least willing to have a conversation, I think I would be inclined to be very direct about it and say, I see that you're with ServiceNow. That's a company that I think I might be interested in. Might you be interested in a connection and at some point a conversation about what life is like or work life is like at ServiceNow? Is that good advice? Do you encourage people to be that direct with their outreach, or is there another approach that you recommend?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, I think being direct is good. I think cutting to the chase and asking your ask is good. But I think I guess a couple of tips on that. As far as how to break into a big company like ServiceNow and through networking, the first thing I would say is because it's a larger company, there's enough people there that you can probably find a smaller subset of people that you have some commonality with. An example would be, let's say you came from a company like UKG or something like that, right? There's probably some people at ServiceNow that are in your target role that came from UKG. So use LinkedIn to filter your list down to those fewer people. And now you can go to them with a more specific message to say, hey, I saw you made a transition from UKG to ServiceNow. I'm looking to do the same. I would love 15 minutes to chat with you if you have the time, just so I can understand a little bit how you went about that in your career. And people like sharing advice. People like helping, especially people like helping people that, are following in their footsteps, right? Because they can appreciate the challenge that you're going through. And so they're more likely to be willing to help you overcome that same challenge. And then the last thing you'll notice that I asked for 15 minutes. I didn't ask for like a bigger time because you want to make the ask really small and easy to say yes to.
Right.
And oftentimes, the conversation will go longer, 15 minutes, right? But making the ask really small and easy is very important. And I think keeping that initial message short too, because again, everybody's LinkedIn message box or inbox is overflowing, right, with long messages. And so the name of the game these days with short attention spans is keep the message short and concise, and then personalize as best you can. And ultimately, that's going to help you get a lot of good conversations going.
Great advice, and that's precisely why people need to work with you and Maddie to help them navigate these waters. I love that advice. Okay, let's get to Taylor's question, and I know there's a few other comments and questions that we'll get to. I think this is a good one. So I think the point that Taylor's making here is that the role is evolving. There are lots of different titles. There are different responsibilities. There are different expectations. What is your suggestion in terms of not confusing recruiters from your resume with such an ambiguous role? Do you run into this? Do you see this? Do the people that you're helping run into this and see this? And what are they doing to clarify expectations in both directions? And Taylor, thank you for the question.
Yeah, that's a really good question because you're right. In pre-sales, along with a lot of other professions, there's a lot of differences or there's a lot of similar job titles that kind of mean the same things or could mean different things. So, if you're going after a sales engineering role, having solution consultant or solutions engineer on your resume is kind of the same thing. Most recruiters would be taught, by the hiring manager that they're hiring for, would be taught that those are the same roles to look for. And so usually you're good if you have at least one of those on there, and you can kind of mix and match some of your titles depending on the roles you're going after. If you find that you are actually applying for a lot of solution consultant positions, maybe that is your main header title on your resume. Solution architecture and technical account management, because you mentioned that in your question, those are a little bit different roles typically. Sometimes it could mean the same thing, so there is some confusion there, but generally solution architect is a different role. A TAM is a slightly different role. And so in those cases, yeah, I would, whatever role you're targeting the most, have your resume use that terminology and those titles as much as you can. And that might mean that you have different variations of your resume. Now, like, we don't typically recommend tailoring your resume for every single job that you go after, unless it's a very different job and it's a job that you really want, like it's something that you're really excited about, then sure, take some time to make your resume a bit tailored. But generally, we say, like, have a couple variations of your resume to target a few different titles potentially and a different, types of roles. For instance, in your example, you say pure pre-sales versus maybe pre and post sales, like covering existing accounts. So you might have one resume that's just pure pre-sales and one that is a little bit of pre-sales and post-sales mix as far as like the focus that you have of that resume, and then use those few variations for the roles that you're applying for. You typically don't need to customize your resume. You can, but and it certainly can help, but the return on your energy probably isn't the best.
Yeah. And the size of the company is going to make a big difference too, right? If it's a large company, you're more likely to have a very specific role.
Yeah.
But if it's a smaller company, you're going to get pulled into more things, right? You're going to do some marketing work. You're going to do some pipeline development. You're going to have to take some post sales or customer service type calls, more than likely, right? You're going to wear more hats if it's a smaller company. Right.
Yeah. And that's fair. And so, if you're going for both big and small companies, you might have a variation in your resume that highlights, that you've worked with in a small, because if you're working in startups, especially, right, a lot of what folks in startups or smaller companies will look for is like, have you been in that environment, that chaotic environment of a startup and wearing multiple hats? And they want to see if you've had that experience before. So highlighting more of that on a resume could be important if you're applying to startups versus if you're applying to big companies. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. John could not have been more well timed with his question. What are some recommendations to help optimize your LinkedIn profile and resume? And he's made a comment there are many resume writers out there. People say not to waste money on resume writers. I'm certainly not going to say that's a waste of money necessarily, although I'm curious to hear what Yuji has to say. But Yuji, in what other way should people be trying to stand out and optimizing either their LinkedIn profile and or their resume, other than what you've already said?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a few main points here, because there's obviously a lot you could do with a resume. But I think generally, like, my position on resume writers is that, just like a lot of things, right? There are some that provide great value and do a really good job, and there's obviously some that don't. And I think a lot of resumes that we've seen that have come from resume writers often focused on like beating the ATS. In other words, stuffing a bunch of keywords in there to make sure that your resume gets through all the filters of the ATS so that your resume gets seen by a human. And we don't really believe in that approach, because ultimately, once a human sees it, right, that they're the ones that decide whether you get an interview or not. It's not the machine, it's not the ATS that decides that. And so we want our resumes to be very, very easy to read. So concise, no big blocks of text, use bullets, and then focus on like the most relevant things, right? Don't put everything in your resume that you've ever done, just the most relevant things that are going to give that recruiter a quick decision, because they're only looking at your resume 30 seconds before they decide they're going to pass or interview you, right? So give them the right amount of information they need to make that decision and ultimately invite you for an interview. And so focus on the human that's reading it, not necessarily just stuffing it with keywords. And then the other thing I would say is, a lot of people, especially with SCs, don't usually put a lot of net metrics.
Mm-hmm.
And but that's oftentimes the most compelling thing, because if I'm hiring an experienced SC, especially, right? And I remember, back to my days as a hiring manager when I was leading SC teams, I want to hire folks that are, proven high performers, people that are not only high performers, but consistent performers, meaning, quarter after quarter, year after year, they've contributed to big ways in the amount of AR they contributed, the size of deals they worked on, right? And so a lot of SE resumes lack metrics. So we work with a lot of AEs too, and AE resumes sometimes lack metrics when it's even more important in an AE role. But even an SC role, having some good metrics is really important. If you don't have metrics, like there's other ways that you can come up with ways to quantify the impact that you've made. But for a lot of people that are in roles currently, I would say always also keep track of your metrics, right? Because if you're in a role for 4 years, you leave the company and you don't have access to the Salesforce anymore or the CRM anymore, right? You lose all your metrics. So always, every quarter, write down what you contributed as far as the ARR you were attached to, the size of the deals, the number of logos, but also like any notable logos that would be good brands to share on your resume. So, those are some things, without going to like the laundry list of things, those are a few things that you can do to beef up your resume.
And when you said logos, not just the companies you've worked for, but the companies you've sold to. Yeah.
Especially if you're selling to enterprise, big brands, and you're going after enterprise roles. Employers want to see that you've sold into Bank of America, or that you've sold into, JPMC or something like that. If you have those logos that you've sold into, like share that, because that's the SE they want to hire, somebody that's navigated a complex organization like a top 5 US bank, right? That's the one example. Obviously those are kind of extreme examples, but there's probably some recognizable logos that you sold to, and so sharing those on your resume. You can't really necessarily always share those on your LinkedIn because some of that might be sensitive or private to the company, but putting on your resume is usually fair game.
Yeah, I mean, it's really key. My wife works for a telecommunications company, and she has, I tell people she's in customer service, customer success. She has she has just 3 small clients: Facebook, Microsoft, and Amazon.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, she deals literally. I mean, she's on calls with them all the time. But I've told her if you ever want to make a change, like that's what you lead with, not what you've done, but the fact that you've been servicing those 3 accounts for almost a decade, right? I mean, so I love what Clifford added here. If you're an expert in a particular profession, consider looking at vendors that sell to your profession. It's great advice. I had a gentleman in particular. He had a background in mental health and the mental health profession, and wanted to break into pre-sales. And I said, there must be software companies that sell to the mental health profession, right? You would be a perfect fit for sales. Now, of course, it depends on how technical their platform is and what their technical expectations are of the role, right?
Yeah.
But you walk in, you have instant credibility, right? So fabulous.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the other thing I'll say too there is like, as SC hiring managers, I'm sure, Ron could speak to this, Chris too, right? Like it's rare, even in this market, even if you have a lot of candidates to choose from, it's still rare that you find an SC candidate that hits on all the points that you want, right? And oftentimes the things we look at, right, are like, do they have sales engineering experience, right? That's one. Do they have domain experience, and do they have the technical experience? And usually you don't get all 3, right? And so if you have the domain experience and that's your strength, then definitely highlight that, to this person's point. And maybe you have some experience with their platform, but you haven't been a sales engineer before. That's probably going to be enough to, make you a compelling option for them as far as hiring them onto your SE team. So like leverage your strengths, focus on, where you have a lot of experience that could be valuable to that organization. That's a good call.
Yeah. Yuji, if you can believe it, we've been at this almost 50 minutes, my friend. Time flies when you're having fun. By the way, I'm assuming JJ O'Malley is someone that someone you recognize. So he did a quick shout out. Nice to hear it. A few more comments. Chris said, write down your impact. Very well said, Chris. And likewise, Taylor said, always tie yourself to revenue as much as possible. Yuji, we're going to take about 10 more minutes here. I do want to, I know you got a busy schedule, so we're going to be respectful of your time. I have two final questions. The first question is, how would somebody know whether or not they might benefit from your organization and the services you offer? What challenges am I faced with? What questions am I asking myself? What am I struggling with that I can turn to Yuji and Maddie at Better Career for help?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So I mean, I guess the first thing I'll say is, the people we support are typically going to be within, or I should say, targeting pre-sales, sales, success, or project management roles. I'd say most of it is actually going to be on the pre-sales and sales side. So account executives, sales engineers. So if you're targeting those roles, whether you're in it already or you're trying to pivot into that type of role for the first time, that's where we focus. But aside from that, a lot of what the things we support people on right now is job search. So, maybe some people are unemployed, or maybe they're employed, but they're looking for their next role. Like I mentioned before, right? Maybe they feel like they're underpaid and they want to get into the next role, and they want to get to the next role faster. And they know that, it's a challenging market. So getting some help on how to go about that, some things we talked about, like how do you do all these little things, like not only your resume, your LinkedIn, but those proof assets. How do you tell or show your skills versus just tell them? And so working through all of that is what we help folks with. So, oftentimes people come to us and they say, well, look, I'm looking for my next job. I, have been in my role for the last 5 years. And before that, my last 2 jobs I got through my network, right? Or I got recruited or poached from those jobs. So I haven't actually had to job search or hunt for a role in a long time. And so, a lot of the folks that we work with that come to us are kind of in that position, right? Where they just haven't searched before. Or maybe we work with folks too that have been looking and they've been trying it on their own, applying to roles, maybe interviewing some too, but just not ultimately getting that job offer. And so they're trying to look for ways to how do they stand out? How do they, differentiate themselves from the rest of the crowded field? And that's often what we help folks with as well. So because we've done it so many times now, we've helped, hundreds of pre-sales and sales folks get into roles at a lot of different tech companies. And so it's something that we've seen a lot of, and so we have a good playbook for. That's on the job search side. The other thing we do a lot more of now, which is really fun, is helping people who are in roles think about the next step in their career. And oftentimes that could be helping them navigate to the next promotion that they're going after. And a lot of times that is actually helping them think about how do they make that move into management. So we have a lot of senior SEs we work with that are saying, yeah, I want to get into a management role. What are some things that I can do to position myself well to get into that role? And so that's something we spend some time on as well with a variety of clients. So, I mean, yeah, Better Career, that's the company. So ultimately we're trying to help people just find, a better career or take their career to the next level is ultimately what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And the final question, the results that your clients and the candidates that have been working with you have been achieving, I could draw some conclusions or make some assumptions, but I would rather not do so. So what are the results that the people that you're working with, what are the results that they're seeing?
Yeah, I think the couple big results, right? Usually we're seeing people get jobs just faster, right? Because they're having to skip a lot of steps. If you think about like going out to the market and looking for a job on your own, if you haven't done it for a while, you have to learn a lot of this through trial and error. You have to keep tweaking your resume to figure out what the right resume structure is. Once you get into interviews, you probably have to go through it a few times and get rejected a few times to really learn how to interview in the right way, especially when you get to that demo or presentation, which all SCs and AEs, almost all 95% of SCs and AEs have to do a presentation or a demo.
Of course.
And so, learning how to do that right takes a few times and some trial and error to figure out. And so the big thing is we help people get into roles just much faster. And then the other big thing is, I think the last time we did the math was, the average income increase from people that we help pivot into a new role or get their next SC role is like 45,000 from the folks that we've helped.
Wow.
And that's obviously, can be arranged. Sometimes it's a lot less than that. Sometimes it's actually quite more than that. We just got a testimonial that came through over the weekend, which was really nice. And she actually tripled her income. Now she came from a real estate, she was a real estate agent and got an AE role. And so obviously the comp on AE role was pretty good. But that was her first AE role. And so she was able to triple her income through, working with Maddie. I'll give Maddie 100% credit. She was the one that worked with her on that. But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of like, why people choose to work with us, is they can get there faster, and then also they can have that level of potentially income increase. And oftentimes it can be pretty life-changing differences in income potentially.
Well, and I shared with you my experience with, in essence, a career coach, a professional career
Oh yeah.
development coach, almost 20 years ago. And without any moment of hesitation, I can say his program changed my life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just the biggest believer. And is it fair to say, Yuji, that you are also helping people sort of narrow the target companies maybe that they're even considering? Like, you're helping them figure out what companies might be a good fit for them. Is that also part of what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. So, I've been in the tech world for a long time, worked in, a few startups, also, consulted for some bigger companies as well. And certainly with obviously having founded Presales Collective, have a lot of connections through different go-to-market teams and pre-sales teams throughout the tech world. And then I'm also a limited LP in GTM Fund, which is a VC, for go-to-market teams, or for go-to-market tech. And so have a very decent understanding of the tech landscape and organizations that are out there. So part of what we do is help people understand like what companies are ones that they could be a good fit in. And also, especially given the landscape now where people want stability and they want a safer bet and they want to go in maybe to a risky startup, there are actually a lot of really, really great startups that are well-funded, have great go-to-market teams, have great product market fit, that are doing really well. And a lot of what we help folks with is also just evaluating those companies to help them understand like what public information can you look at to assess if a company is healthy and it has good chances of succeeding. And then also what questions should you ask throughout the interview process to also help you get all the right information to properly evaluate if this company is a good fit for you and also has a good chance of growing and and being successful in the future.
Yeah. It's an amazing service.
Yeah.
Yuji, thank you so much for being here. Any final words or closing words as we wrap things up? By the way, Robert, you asked if the recording would be posted. The recording will live in LinkedIn. It's also on YouTube, but I will make sure that I repost it. I'm sure Yuji will as well. So it's as easy to find. I've had a few people tell me that my past recordings are difficult to find. So I'll make sure that everybody can get access to this. And Aaron just asked a question. How can I get connected to learn more about your offer? Yuji, is it fair to say that you would be more than happy to have anyone connect directly with you?
Yeah. Just connect with me on LinkedIn. Shoot me a direct message if you want. The link to our site is also on my LinkedIn page as well, so you can get any of those options work well.
Yeah. Any other closing words from you, Yuji?
I mean, I'll just, a lot of we talked about is job search. So I think maybe that I'll leave for everybody, whether you're actively job searching or in a role currently, just think about how you can, set yourself up for success in your career proactively. So a couple examples would be always think about building your network consistently throughout your career, right? Because your network is important and it's going to ultimately help you get to where you want to go in your career. And the worst part to start to network and build your network is like when you're looking for a job, right? Or you've been laid off, and obviously we know that that's a tough place to be. But think about how you can continue to expand your network. Also, track your achievements that you're achieving in your role, the milestones that you hit, where you're making contributions, your metrics, especially if you're in a metric-driven role like sales, pre-sales, or success, right? Track all that stuff regularly because it's going to help you when you're going for the next promotion or when you're looking for the next job. So just constantly be thinking about that and do a reflection or check-in with yourself every quarter to make sure you have a good sense of what all that looks like for yourself. And it's ultimately help you, like we talked about at the very beginning, to go for a full circle here, help you market yourself effectively when you're, trying to go after, again, that promotion or the next role.
Yeah.
But yeah, with that, I just want to thank everybody for joining and, listening to us for about an hour here. Hopefully you got some nuggets that will help you along your journey. But, regardless, I wish you the best in your career, and don't hesitate to reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn. And Chris, thanks so much for having me on today.
Thank you, Yuji. I mean, I'm seeing the comments fly in here. I think anyone and everyone who sat through this enjoyed the conversation and took something away from it. I know I took something away from it as well. Yuji, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. Folks, for those of you who hung around for this conversation, thank you so much. If you caught the recording and you stuck around to the end, thanks for joining. You can follow hashtag Tech Sales Advice to be alerted for these. And of course, you can go to techsalesmastery.com to learn more about the business I run. Also, I see Ron Whitson has made a few comments. I'm just going to make a comment that Ron's book is a new book called A Friendly Human in Pre-Sales, 7 Timeless Behaviors. I think it's going to be released mid-September. That's also going to be a great resource for anybody considering the pre-sales profession. So with that, Yuji, hang around backstage just for a minute. We'll part ways. Otherwise, everyone, good to see you. Thanks for being around. I'll be back next week with another Tech Sales Advice.